The wind howled through the Oregon wilderness, carrying the scent of pine and regret. Elias Carter stood at the edge of the campsite, his breath visible in the crisp October air, wondering how he'd let himself get roped into this. He was 25, a graphic designer from Seattle, and the last place he belonged was out here, miles from Wi-Fi, with a group of strangers who thought roughing it was a personality trait. It was supposed to be a team-building retreat for the outdoor gear startup he'd joined 6 months ago. Elias, with his city-bred cynicism and zero camping experience, had packed reluctantly, expecting awkward small talk and mosquito bites. But as he scanned the group setting up tents by Lake Crescent's shimmering edge, his eyes landed on Mateo Alvarez, the quiet warehouse worker who'd barely said 2 words in the office. Mateo, 26, was all broad shoulders and steady hands, his dark eyes catching the fading sunlight as he hammered a tent peg with precision. Elias felt a jolt, something he couldn't name but couldn't ignore. "Yo, Carter, you gonna stand there or help?" called Sarah, the team's overly enthusiastic coordinator. Elias snapped out of his daze, muttering an apology, and grabbed a bundle of tent poles. He fumbled, the poles clattering to the ground, and Mateo glanced over, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice low and warm, like a fire just starting to catch. Elias flushed. "I'm good, just figuring it out." He wasn't. Mateo crossed the clearing, his boots crunching on pine needles, and knelt beside him. "Like this," he said, guiding Elias's hands to slot the poles together. Their fingers brushed, and Elias's pulse stuttered. Mateo didn't pull away immediately, his gaze lingering a beat too long before he stood and returned to his own tent. By nightfall, the group huddled around a campfire, sharing stories and passing a flask of bourbon. Elias sat across from Mateo, stealing glances as the flames cast shadows across his sharp jawline. Sarah, ever the organizer, announced the sleeping arrangements. "We're short 1 tent," she said, wincing. "Elias, you cool sharing with Mateo? His is big enough." Elias's stomach flipped. Mateo shrugged, casual, but his eyes flicked to Elias with a question in them. "Sure," Elias managed, his voice betraying a tremor. The group dispersed, and soon, it was just the 2 of them, crawling into a 2-person tent that suddenly felt too small. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of nylon and nervous energy. Elias lay on his side, hyper-aware of Mateo's presence inches away, the rustle of his sleeping bag like a heartbeat. "You ever done this before?" Mateo asked, breaking the silence. "Camping? Hell no," Elias said, aiming for humor but sounding shaky. "You? Grew up hiking in New Mexico. This is home for me." Mateo's voice was soft, reflective. "Out here, you can't hide who you are. The wilderness strips you down." Elias turned to face him, the dim glow of a lantern casting Mateo's face in gold. "What's that supposed to mean?" Mateo hesitated, then propped himself on an elbow. "Means you can't fake it. No masks. Just you." His eyes held Elias's, unflinching, and something unspoken passed between them. A spark, a challenge, a truth neither was ready to name. Sleep didn't come easily. Elias lay awake, listening to Mateo's steady breathing, wondering why his heart wouldn't slow down. By morning, the air had shifted, heavy with possibility. They emerged from the tent into the misty dawn, and when their eyes met, Elias knew nothing would be the same. The second day brought a group hike up a rugged trail toward a lookout point. Elias lagged behind, his sneakers slipping on loose rocks, his lungs burning from the altitude. Mateo, naturally, was near the front, moving with the ease of someone born to the wild. Every so often, he'd glance back, checking on Elias, and each look felt like a tether pulling Elias forward. At the summit, The group spread out to take photos of the sprawling valley below. Elias found a quiet spot on a flat rock, catching his breath when Mateo appeared beside him. "Not bad for a city boy," he teased, offering a water bottle. Elias took it, their fingers brushing again, and he cursed himself for noticing. "I'm surviving," he said, forcing a grin. "Barely." Mateo sat down, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "You're doing better than you think." His tone was earnest, disarming. They sat in silence, the wind whistling through the pines, and Elias felt a pull he couldn't explain, a need to know this man who seemed so at ease in a world Elias barely understood. That night, a storm rolled in, unexpected and fierce. Rain battered the campsite, and the group scrambled to secure their gear. Elias and Mateo's tent held strong, but the tension inside was electric. As thunder rumbled, they sat cross-legged, sharing a flashlight and a deck of cards Mateo had pulled from his pack. "Go fish," Mateo said, smirking, "unless you're scared of losing." Elias laughed, the sound easing the knot in his chest. They played, trading jabs and stories. Elias about his chaotic childhood in Chicago, Mateo about his tight-knit family in Albuquerque. But when Mateo mentioned a high school boyfriend, his voice faltered, and Elias's heart skipped. "Didn't end well," Mateo said, eyes on his cards. He wasn't ready to be out. "I was." Elias swallowed, the air between them charged. "That why you keep to yourself at work?" Mateo looked up, surprised. "Maybe. Hard to trust people when you've been burned." He set his cards down, leaning closer. "What about you? You ever let anyone in?" The question hit like a punch. Elias wanted to deflect, to joke, but Mateo's gaze pinned him. "Not really," he admitted. "Easier to keep things surface level." Mateo nodded, like he understood more than Elias had said. The storm raged outside, but inside the tent, a quiet understanding bloomed. When they finally lay down, the space between them felt smaller, the distance less daunting. By the third day, the group dynamic had shifted. Sarah noticed Elias and Mateo sticking closer, exchanging quiet smiles, and she raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The team was tasked with a scavenger hunt, pairing off to find marked locations around the lake. Naturally, Elias and Mateo teamed up, their steps falling into sync as they navigated the forest. The hunt took them off the main trail, into a dense thicket where the air was cool and heavy with moss. They found a checkpoint, a small flag tied to a tree, and sat to rest. Elias's guard was down, the wilderness working its magic, stripping away his usual defenses. "You ever feel like you're running from something?" he asked, surprising himself. Mateo leaned back against a tree, considering. "All the time. Used to think it was my family's expectations. Then it was the world's. Now I think it's just me." His honesty was raw, unguarded, and it pulled Elias in. "I get that," Elias said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I keep waiting for life to make sense, you know? Like there's a plan I'm supposed to follow." Mateo turned, his eyes searching Elias's face. "Maybe there's no plan. Maybe it's just moments." He reached out, his hand resting on Elias's arm, warm and steady. The touch sent a shiver through Elias, and for a moment, the world was just them. No team, no wilderness, no expectations. But the moment shattered when Sarah's voice called from a distance, summoning them back. They returned to camp, the air between them humming with unspoken words. That night, as they lay in the tent, Elias felt bold. "Mateo," he whispered, "what are we doing?" Mateo turned, his face inches away. "I don't know," he said, voice thick with emotion. "But I don't want to stop." Their hands found each other in the dark, fingers intertwining, and Elias's heart pounded with a mix of fear and exhilaration. They didn't speak again, but the silence said everything. The final morning dawned clear, the storm's aftermath leaving the air fresh and the lake mirror smooth. Elias woke first, Mateo's arm draped across his chest, their sleeping bags tangled. He froze, not wanting to break the moment. But Mateo stirred, his eyes soft with something new. Trust, maybe, or hope. They packed up in silence, the weight of the weekend settling in. The group was set to leave by noon, but before they did, Elias and Mateo slipped away to the lake's edge. The water lapped gently, and Elias felt the courage he'd been missing his whole life. "I don't know what this is," he said, voice shaking, "but I know I don't want it to end here." Mateo's smile was small but real. "Me neither. But it's not going to be easy. You ready for that?" Elias thought of his life in Seattle, safe, predictable, lonely. Then he looked at Mateo, at the man who'd seen him, really seen him, in a way no one else had. "Yeah," he said, "I'm ready." They returned to the group, hands brushing as they walked, a quiet promise forming. The ride back to the city was filled with chatter, but Elias and Mateo shared a private world, their glances saying what words couldn't. When they parted at the office, Mateo pressed a note into Elias's hand. "Meet me at the pier tonight. 8 p.m. Elias stood on the pier that evening, the Seattle skyline glittering behind him. Mateo appeared, his silhouette familiar now, and they stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the water. "This is just the start," Mateo said, his voice steady. "We've got time." The wilderness had stripped them bare, forcing them to face their fears, their truths, their hearts. What began as a shared tent had become a shared future, uncertain but bright. They'd found each other in the wild, and that, Elias knew, was worth everything.